would you use?
Spoilers.
Spoilers. Spoilers. Spoilers. Spoilers. Spoilers. I like that word.
I thought you might.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Review Who Missing Presumed Lost, and today it's time to roll the dice in the games of the Celestial Toymaker. Whilst previous stories had seen characters written out for 1 or 2 episodes so the actors could take a much needed break, the Celestial Toymaker broke fairly new ground in being one of the first Doctor-light stories. The Doctor is still very much part of the event, but the majority of the story is left up to companions Stephen and Dodo. And whilst perhaps not the most thrilling story from a narrative perspective, it left a lasting impression on fans, as well as the legacy of Doctor Who's expanded universe. The Celestial Toymaker, to give it a good gaming analogy, is a bit like poker. Everyone understands the basics of what's going on, but when you start to get into more of the details, some people may lose interest very quickly. It's not your most conventional Doctor Who story. At times it feels more like fantasy rather than sci-fi. But that being said, when you compare it to other stories with similar elements, such as The Mind Robber and Night Terrors, it certainly has a unique draw to it. And whilst you might finish it with the feeling, well, that was interesting, it doesn't leave you feeling unsatisfied. And one standout feature of this story is that it introduces us to a brand new villain, to the audience at least, who has seemingly encountered the Doctor in a previously untold story.
It's so nice to see you again. The last time you were here, I hoped you'd stay long enough for a game.
In this instance, an adventure that wouldn't be revealed for another 33 years. But it serves as a good series reminder early on that whilst for us the Doctor's adventures began with an unearthly child, for the Doctor, things have been going on much longer. A long-standing rumour is that this story was actually going to be the one that featured the Doctor regenerating. However, as is often the way with rumours, as they go on over time, they do get a bit muddled up. As still happens in this story, the Doctor does disappear. However, it was originally conceived that when he reappeared, he would be played by a different actor, but this has nothing to do with regeneration. Producer John Wiles' original idea of the Doctor changing actors was actually something of a ploy to dispense with the services of William Hartnell, as the two were known for having a disagreeable working relationship. Partly due to Wiles wanting to steer the series into a particular direction but not being allowed to, but also due to Hartnell, known by some for being difficult to work with at times for various reasons, being in ill health at the time, and also protective of the series as one of the only original team left by that point. However, it all goes a bit further than that, as this story, unlike many others, had actually taken shape under 2 different production teams. This led to some criticisms and complaints from other rights holders that their characters were being potentially used illegally in production. An example of this was the character of Cyril, who was inspired by the Boys Magazine character Billy Bunter. In an unscripted line in episodes 3, Cyril's actor Peter Stevens ad-libbed a line that he was known as Billy to his friends.
Hello, remember me? I'm Cyril, known to my friends as Billy.
And due to limited retakes at the time, this was unable to be cut and as such was included in the finished episode. This in turn led to the BBC being legally forced into including a continuity announcement at the start of episode 4, something which had never happened before, in order to clarify that Cyril was not Billy Bunter, so that they might avoid any legal action by Bunter's actual copyright holder. Now I've added in this extra section because I would like to address something very important in this episode, especially for the benefit of those who may not have seen it before. In episode 2, the rhyme, Eeny, Meeny, Miny, Mo, is recited by one of the Toymaker's characters. And in this instance of this rhyme, a racial slur beginning with N is used. In subsequent soundtrack re-releases of this story, this word is removed, obscured or overdubbed. However, some stills reconstructions still do have this word audible. Nowadays, of course, this is a word that is considered incredibly offensive by many, and rightly so. However, at the time of this story's production in 1966, this word was still very much in common usage and was generally considered acceptable. And this is one of, thankfully, only a few instances in classic Doctor Who where I'll be raising the point that these stories are a product of their time. It's not an excuse, it's a reason. So the question now is, how should these things be dealt with in current times, especially if the story were ever to get a reconstruction? Well, I'm going to take a bit of a potentially controversial stand here, but the way I see it, if these things are removed for being offensive, then yes, nobody gets offended by them. But in doing so, it would also remove the lesson that times and attitudes change, and things that were acceptable in years gone by are no longer acceptable today. I'm sure many people would turn around and go, well, that's obvious, but look around you. Some people, even in today's world, still need to be told that. If, as and when this story is ever released on DVD, the way I would do it personally is to leave the scene in, which is kind of necessary for the narrative, but mute the offensive word, and before episode 2 plays, throw up a disclaimer on screen explaining why a specific word has been muted. It's not a perfect solution, I grant you, but as a means of showing this story with all scenes intact as it was meant to be seen, but with respect to modern day values, it's the best solution I can come up with. It should be, as this section is titled, a lesson learned. With only 3 out of the 4 episodes missing, the Celestial Toymaker would seem a prime candidate for reconstruction. But being such a Dr. Light story in its own right, and being another of those stories that adds little to no addition to the overall narrative of the series, it features very little in it that is likely to draw newer audiences other than it being a previously missing episode. Now, the Toymaker was going to reappear later in the series in the cancelled Season 23 story, The Nightmare Fair, which was later adapted into both a novel and a Big Finish story. And he has also appeared in other stories, some of which present an interesting account of his origins, and has also recently appeared opposite the 12th Doctor in a comic. But that doesn't really alter the fact that it is still unlikely for it to be animated sooner rather than later. But it does give me an idea about how a release of this story could be made more popular. Taking inspiration from the 4th Doctor time capsule set, imagine if we got a Celestial Toy Box set, featuring not only a newly animated reconstruction of the Celestial Toymaker, but a reprint of the book Divided Loyalties and an exclusive Celestial Toymaker figure. Okay, it's unlikely to happen, but it's certainly an idea. To sum up the Celestial Toymaker, I would describe it, rather appropriately, like a board game with no instructions. A fun experience, but one that can seem a little bit off at times. It's not the most compelling story, and with so little of its actual action still viewable, well, imagine someone describing a game show to you that you're not watching as it happens. That's kind of how it feels. But at only 4 episodes long, with the final episode 4 still existing in its entirety, it's still an entertaining story to listen to / watch. So if you ever find yourself with an hour and a half-ish spare, and you've never seen it before, what have you got to lose? Actually, that's not the best question to ask where the Toymaker is concerned. But that brings to a close another review Who Missing Presumed Lost. As always, I hope you all enjoyed this video. Like, favorite, subscribe, share, it really helps me out a lot. Be sure to look up the description below for a link to my Patreon. I'm doing my very first figure animation and you can get involved. There's exclusive content and rewards for those who do so, and funding my Patreon in any way gets your name at the end of my videos. I salute you all, and I will see you with another video very soon.